webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
We're starting now. We're just.
Good afternoon. This is Mayor Rick Lott, and at this time I'd like to call this special agenda meeting to order. Today we are going to discuss our annual budget for the 2021 fiscal years, and tonight we are obviously streaming live, and we also have the opportunity to be able to meet in person. And we are, if you're here, and if you're not here, you can definitely see that we are being very conscious of all the COVID-19 spacing regulations, and those are occurring as we're sitting here. We're spaced out amongst our auditorium so that we're honoring those rules. I'd like to go ahead and start off by turning this over to our city manager. Good afternoon, city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here. This is that exciting time of the year when we unveil our proposed budget for the coming fiscal year. I know that you all are aware that today represents the culmination of literally months of work. Our department heads have to do this on the individual department and division level and provide us a great deal of detail. All of that gets washed through our finance department, and then the CFO and I begin sifting through really what amounts to voluminous data to arrive at the product that we will be presenting tonight. I have had the pleasure of going through this numerous times, 5 times last week with each of you individually, so that you were fully aware of what was in this presentation. But then again, this morning, we were able to present it for our department division directors and managers. And I have to tell you, the more I see it, the more excited I get. I think that this budget represents tremendous progress for our city. There are a lot of very beneficial projects, and there's a lot of fiscal responsibility in this budget, and I'm very excited about that. Tonight we will walk you through, and this is the detailed overview and a bit of a drill down into the numbers, as well as touching on the projects. And as has been the practice over the last 3 of these, we will be coming back at the first public hearing with a slightly different version that will focus more on the projects and what we hope to accomplish in the coming fiscal year, and move a little bit away from all the detail that we'll see tonight. And that's actually the part that I look most forward to, being able to detail the projects, programs, and things that we are looking to do in a very exciting coming fiscal year. I want to thank all of our department directors for their role in getting us here, and I especially want to thank Finance and our CFO, Diane Reichert. And with that, I will turn the podium over to Diane, who will begin to walk us through. We are prepared to address questions as they come up, and if you have any comments on particular items, as Diane goes through it, there are a few items that I will also be commenting on. And with that, Diane.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, Mayor, City Commissioners, and citizens. So here we are to present the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021. And we have the financial trends we're going to talk about as of fiscal year 2019, the proposed overall budget, fund discussions, and we'll talk about the budget summary at the end. As always, when we develop a budget, we wrap them around the 5 core strategies: facilitating economic development, fostering community engagement, empowering outstanding customer service, engaging in effective communication, and maximizing organizational effectiveness. And all the department directors worked on those strategies as they prepared the budget. When we look at the financial trends for the fiscal year, we saw that 27 trends, 24 of them were positive and 3 were marginal. And I'm going to highlight a few of those areas. Our population over the last 10 years has increased 13.6%. As of 2019, we were at 39,378. At the end of the year, we ended with 3.2% unemployment. It was slightly higher than the county's 2.9%, but we were better than the U.S. rate of 3.5%. Total construction value in the city tripled over the last 10 years, more than tripled, from 51 million up to almost 173 million in fiscal year 2019. All right, so our financial trends for the taxable value, we went from 2.2 billion at the end of the fiscal year in 2019, and we're up to 2.674 billion for the fiscal year you're about to see. The city's assessed taxable valuation per capita, the bottom right-hand corner, is 46,672. It's been a positive trend over the past several years, so we're thankful for that. As we look at expenditures, the operating expenditures in the general fund per capita was $610, and yet in 2010, the operating expenditures per capita were $632, almost $33. So we've been able to continue to provide service at a lower cost per citizen. Salaries and wages are at 52% in general fund, and when you add all the benefits onto that, it makes it 79%. The annual salary per employee in constant dollars is $47,695. If you look at the financial trends on the expenditures, which we're proud of this because in fiscal year 2009, we had deployed 14 employees per 1,000 citizens. Over the last 10 years, we've maintained less than 12 employees per 1,000 citizens. And you can see we ended 2019 with 11.12, and yet even though we've added some positions back to the budget, we're still at 11.49, which is a good ratio. The financial trends in the operating position of the general fund is we're at 44% of our operating revenue, which, as you can see by the graph below, we are above our targeted fund balance of 15%. The final trend that we have to look at tonight is on the debt section, and we can see from the year of 2009, we were at 1,786, and the long-term debt has declined over the years down to $632 per resident. So as we review the proposed budget for next fiscal year, we're at 86,138,387 in the current fiscal year, what we started with when we adopted it. When we got to the end of the year for next fiscal year, it's $94,709,093. That's a 9.9% increase. That 9.9% increase represents using a lot of reserves. We are using some general fund reserves to do capital programs. We use the CIT reserves to do some more capital. We've got wastewater development fees for new sewer lines. We've got water and sewer we're going to talk about a little later. The solid waste reserves are used for the new residential automation garbage collection service. And then the fleet replacement fund is designed and put there so that we can purchase vehicles as we need to. So in the proposed total budget, you see that the general fund is about $40 million. The water and sewer fund is $23 million. Solid waste is $10 million. You have stormwater, transportation surtax, street gas tax fund, and special revenue funds all added together. Those each are running about $2 to $3 million. And community redevelopment agency is a standalone section, so we'll talk about that one later as well. The millage rate, there is no increase in the millage rate, although the property values have increased 11.5%, and then in the CRA values, they've increased 7.8%. The dedicated 1 mil out of that millage rate of 5.7157 goes towards street maintenance, street repairs, anything dedicated for street resurfacing and street maintenance. So we have $2 million for citywide streets, $161,000 for in the CRA district alone, and $325,000 will be going into the street maintenance fund to maintain our streets and continue to maintain our streets. As we compare our millage rate of 18.48 in Plant City at the bottom line, where that compares to Lakeland, we're 1 mil lower than Lakeland, we're 1.5 mils lower than Temple Terrace, and we're right almost even with the unincorporated area of Hillsborough County. So the salary increase that we have in the proposed budget is a 2.5% cost of living increase for all employees effective October 1. The police and fire do have step plans, and they will continue to be eligible for their step plan increases on their anniversary dates. In addition to the salary increase, we've included the health insurance costs. Oh, excuse me. Yes, ma'am.
You go back one. You want us to bring up questions as we go through? Or
Up
you
to
want?
you.
Okay.
I think that how they have this laid out is for when we get through the general budget, for if there's any changes or recommendations for it, but if there's questions right now, I think we question anything. But I think we'd make a motion to make changes at the end of the general fund budget.
Okay, just
Okay.
go ahead then.
Keep going.
I'll wait.
All righty. So then, in addition to the increase, we also have the health insurance costs went up 8.5% for the city. That's a $347,000 health insurance cost that the city is going to bear. And the tuition reimbursement program is set out for employees to take advantage of. We have 5 employees currently furthering their education. So the new positions that we've added to the budget is a building inspector, administrative assistant to help in the cemetery area. We have parks maintenance, groundskeeper 1 and another 2 of those, and 1 groundskeeper 2. Planning department has added a planner, and as you know from the building inspector and the planning, we've got a lot going on in town, so we needed to add some positions in that area. The stormwater operator 2 position, that is going to be an initiative we're bringing forward when I get to the stormwater budget section. We have 1 part-time employee in the city, and that part-time employee will go back to a full-time employee. We're increasing that position. And then in the utility maintenance area, we're adding a maintenance mechanic to continue to maintain our equipment to keep our operation running. So when you look at the position counts, we were at 455.5, 6 more in governmental funds, 2.5 in the enterprise funds. That puts us up to 464 full-time equivalent employees. Another initiative we started a couple years ago, and that has been our social media and branding. As you can see, we've reached on Facebook 1.3 million people, and you can see by the graph on the left for the 10 months of this fiscal year how the traffic has been in the various different methods of social media. The lobbyist we have is $60,000 a year. We provide ongoing legislative interactions with the lobbyists. They've helped us to get McIntosh Park improvements. Some money there, so they've been a benefit to our city. Some of the outside agencies that we support, it continues to be the same ones that we've been supporting all along, so this just shows you at a glance all the different agencies, and rather than me read them all, you can see them all on the screen. In addition to the general fund supporting those agencies, the CDBG fund has the Boys and Girls Club of $20,000, and the CRA fund supports the 1914 building maintenance to keep up with the ongoing maintenance there. So that finishes our overall discussion. Now we want to get into the fund discussion. So in our general fund revenue, we have $2 million higher than last fiscal year. One of the reasons, the majority of the reason, is for the property taxes, as we demonstrated to you earlier, the increase that we've seen. We have some areas where we did budget a little bit conservatively this year because at the state level, we've seen a decline in the sales tax, revenue sharing, and the half-cent sales tax. The recreation fees have been down, so we continue to keep that theme as we budgeted. So these are just some of the ups and downs that we've seen in the general fund revenues. As you look at the general fund revenue broken down by categories, the taxes makes up more than 50% of the general fund budget. Permits, which is associated with building permits, business tax licenses, etc., those fees all fall under the permits and fees section. Intergovernmental revenue comes from the federal government, the state government, and some of that state revenue sharing I was speaking about earlier. The charges for services, that's associated with ambulance fees, recreation fees, so that's your $1.8 million there. Other sources is transfers in and out of the fund. So then when we look at the general fund allocations on the appropriation side, we see that the police department is 30% of the budget, fire department is 18%, and the parks and recreation is 15%. And the other uses that's not specifically identified on here is 16% of our expenditure budget. Administration runs at 11%, development services is 8%, and the library is at 2%. So our general fund expenditures for personal services is up by 1.4 million. Our operating expenditures are up by $1 million, and our non-operating is up by 418,000. And we'll show you some of those reasons in a moment. The personal services, we talked about the 6 new positions. We talked about the 2.5% increase for employees, continuing the public safety step plans. The health insurance cost in the general fund alone is $192,000. That's the portion of the 347 that affects the general fund. Then, in addition to that, we've allocated $785,000 more to public safety pension, more than it's actuarially required. So that's included in the budget. Then also some other operating expenditure highlights is in the professional standards department, which we included positions there, plus an ADA coordinator. We have document restoration, Office 365. We have some cleaning services that we've improved upon that cost us more money. We have property general liability insurance increases we've seen there. Vehicle lease program, as new vehicles came on, then we had to budget for the lease portion so we'd be prepared as they ran out that we could purchase them in the future years. Project management, performance dashboard, those are new software features that we need to enhance our operations. And we have cardiac monitors and auto compression devices in the fire department. So some of the non-operating expenditure increases, as we told you, that the property tax value increased in the general fund. So some of that has to get transferred over to the CRA fund. So we had to budget that increase. We budgeted out of the general fund the transfer into the street fund of $325,000. We'll talk a little bit about the capital outlay that we have for the budget in a little bit later. The document restoration, we have some very old books that are mutilated, damaged, and difficult to read. The city clerk has bought for preserving and digitally archiving those records. So that cost of $27,000 is included in the budget. In our IT division, the computers, et cetera, have been purchased by each department. We've been budgeting them in each division, in each department, but we put them all into the information technology division this year, and they will do all the capital expenses for that. And we cost allocated the different enterprise funds for those purchases. As we purchase new computers, we always put the current version of Microsoft on that computer. So we've gone from the individual purchase on the Microsoft on the computer itself to a subscription base. That's costing an increase, but it's going to allow us to be more compatible citywide so that all of us have the same version of the software. So now some capital items. The Planting Center had a kitchen facelift a couple years ago, and now we have $25,000 in there for design to improve the exterior and interior of the Planting Center. The Oaklawn Cemetery fence, we are currently working on the retaining wall over by the cemetery, and it will have some wrought iron on the top of it. This is some wrought iron fencing to finish out the other side of it and to allow a nice gateway to come into the city. The walk trail lighting at Ellis Method, added some lights to that to be able to complete that project. That's a $20,000 cost. Asset maintenance has been a very positive for the city of Plant City as we put aside money to be able to do things for the recurring expenses, and these are some of the examples, the Sandstone Park and park improvements. And then it continues on into the general services division, so when an air conditioning breaks or something goes wrong with an air conditioner, we have money set aside to be able to fix those air conditioners and don't have to wait for a budget adjustment. The City Hall exterior and window maintenance, we put aside money every year for that. And then the roof upgrades. As you know, we worked on City Hall roof this year. We're working on the general services roof. Next year, we have Parks and Recreation roof and Fire Station 1 roof. But in addition to that, we'll continue to put money aside so that we're prepared to fix our roofs as we need to over time. This community investment tax, it's an additional half-cent sales tax that comes into the city. And as you can see, we had small increases over the 3 previous fiscal years. This current fiscal year, we saw a decline, a slight increase over next fiscal year to give you an idea of where that revenue comes from. And then the money is spent as what we get in, we spend. And so we have a lot of projects that are on the plate for being able to complete in next fiscal year. Plus, we pay for the debt service for the police station and the current City Hall as until 2024 before we are paid off. So some of the exciting projects we have is the playground, $175,000 for the playground. We also have a spray park in there. This is for research and design to determine where the location of the spray park should be and how much amenities we should buy, et cetera. So this just gets us started. The tennis center and restrooms, we started that project last fiscal year. We were going to put a shower and a restroom facility in there. We determined that we needed more than just that, so we added an additional $350,000 to make that an all-encompassing improvement to the tennis area. The Dort Street basketball and tennis courts are worn and unsuitable, and we're going to replace the courts, fix the fencing, fix the basketball goals, the nets, the benches, and the trash receptacles and everything. All of this includes design and construction. And the good part about this was we had a project that was finished, and so we transferred that $134,000 over. We only had to use $165,000 of new money to be able to fund this for $300,000.
City owns a piece of property on Cornet Road, commonly referred to as Boy Scout Pit. This project is to study the feasibility of turning this into a publicly accessible lakefront park that would support activities like fishing from the bank or a pier that we might construct and kayaking, activities like that. We do not have any publicly accessible water of this nature anywhere else in the city, and we want to explore the opportunity of providing this access as a public amenity, and that is what this particular study project is about.
So last year we put money in there for the fire preemption to be able to allow fire trucks to get through the signals without stopping. And so that project is underway right now. We have 10 signals done and then 9 more signals for next fiscal year. So this is phase 2 of that project. The Fire Station 2, last year, again, we budgeted to improve the kitchen, the day room, the offices, fix the dormitories, fix the apparatus bay floor. So all of that will start in October, but then as soon as that's finished, we have a money in there for painting, $35,000. So it won't begin until we finish Fire Station 3, but we'll get there. Police Department has budgeted to fix their floors. They're in a building that needs their floors to be restored. So that's the second phase of that portion. They have vehicles in there, 12 vehicles, replacement vehicles for $413,000. That's coming out of the fleet fund, part of their contribution every year to be able to be prepared to purchase these vehicles. Their capital outlay includes desktop computers, laptop computers for their patrol cars, and then they have SWAT entry vests with ballistic plates.
The police department is also engaging and entering into a pilot program for body-worn and possibly other cameras. And what we have to do here is research the state of the technology and the market. As you'll know, we've been looking at this for the last several years, and we had some cameras that were experimented with about 3 years ago, and they were the technology wasn't mature at that point. And I think a couple of you on the dais actually commented when you saw the demo about how bulky and kind of wonky and heavy they were. The technology has improved greatly, and we are looking at a couple of market leaders. But there's a lot that goes into implementing a program like this, and we put some of the points that have to be assessed on this particular slide. You know, just because the technology works for one jurisdiction doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the best fit in another jurisdiction. So we really have to look at what's available. There are some very interesting financing and market penetration type of programs that are available that Chief and I were talking about. So we'll be looking into all of that to identify the state of technology, the best possible technology for our agency, and then the impacts not only from an operational and policy standpoint, but also fiscally. And on this side, you see we have some estimates that the initial capital investment would be at least $200,000, and we could be looking at recurring costs of at least $125,000 to maintain such a program. The cost on the recurring maintenance is not necessarily replacement of the hardware. It relates more to the storage and retrieval capabilities for the vast amounts of data that a camera or technology of this type will generate. So that is a pilot program, and that is getting underway with the beginning of the fiscal year. And we are currently discussing options with vendors, and the chief has two of the front runner companies in this marketplace prepared to come in and do demonstrations and provide us with test equipment. So you'll be hearing more about this as the new fiscal year moves along.
Then we have, in the General Services Division, we have the old post office. And we went and bought the post office, and we assessed it, and we found out that the post office itself was too much to replace. So we have $150,000 in there to demolish the post office in the next fiscal year so that we can determine the space needs assessment.
I think I'll take a moment. You know, this has been quite the process. We've done a lot of work assessing the building, trying to figure out exactly what the state and the viability of it is. It's not in good shape. It's a 1935 building. It has a number of issues. And rather than come back in the fiscal year with a budget adjustment, I've asked that this money for demolition be included in the budget so that we have the option to proceed in that direction should it be deemed the best way to go. And at this point, I would say and prepare everyone to prepare that that is probably the direction we are going in. And I would put probably at about a 96% likelihood. The building just has a lot of issues, and the cost of bringing it up to a point that it could then be renovated into some other type of space to meet our needs is quite a bit more than were we to start with a blank canvas and build new. So that's why this is in there.
So when we go into the streets fund, as you can see, we have a balanced budget. We had transferred the $325,000 over here to balance out the budget. We had been using fund balance in previous fiscal years, so we're thankful to have a budget that is presentable and balanced. This street resurfacing does not come out of this $2.7 million. So if you notice, the budget is a $2.7 million budget, but the street resurfacing comes from the $1 million. So as you can see, with everything else going on in the street fund, we could not be able to do the street resurfacing had it not been for the $1 million. In addition to that, we have other street maintenance items that are included in the street budget, which is the $50,000 for sidewalks. But the railroad crossings and the public parking lots, which can be used street funds to pay for, we're paying for that out of the CIT funds. So just to give you a flavor of how the street fund is operating. Traffic projects are included in the street fund. This is our second year of the traffic controller upgrades. They upgraded 25 of them this year. We have 25 slated for next year. In the fiber optic cable, this is what runs the whole network of the system, and we're replacing it over a 5-year period. So 125,000 total feet of fiber optic cable. We did 50,000 the current year and 50,000 every year for 5 years. And then the traffic management system itself is quite expensive, and so we put money aside so when the 5 to 7 years are up, we're ready to replace it or upgrade it, whatever we need to do to be able to keep that program running. There are some LED illuminated street signs that we put up this fiscal year, and we have some more that are going to be put up in the next fiscal year. So that's our traffic portion of the streets fund. Now we move on to water and sewer fund. This fund has a code requirement that we look at the rates every year, and so it's going to go up by 0.6% in the next fiscal year. As you can see, the plan is to use $2.7 million of our fund balance. It's going towards a capital project that we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. But the major thing is that every year we have to put money aside for water and sewer asset maintenance. These are some big projects that are not specifically identified. I won't tell you exactly which lift stations, what water storage tank's going to be fixed, but we put money aside so that if any of this and from these assets break down, we're prepared to fix them in a timely manner. The water treatment plant number 5 north of town is in the process right now. We're under design, testing, and permitting. We expect to begin construction in the first quarter of 2021. 15 months later, we should complete construction, and this is a good project because our storage capacity is expected to cap out in 2021. We're glad to have this project moving forward. And that is the use of fund balance. If you look at the very bottom of the screen, we had some money set aside and we had started putting money away. We are adding $4.3 million to the project. $1.9 million is coming from a current project that's not going to be completed, and then $2.4 million is coming from the fund balance to be able to complete the project. McIntosh Park is a big project for us, a lot going on out there. We really don't have any additional money set aside to do recreation this year. We have a current project ongoing. that has been funded from city impact fees plus the state monies. But we wanted to remind you of what it's going to look like when we're all finished. We've got a lot to do, a lot going on. And the reason it's under the Water and Sewer Division is because Recreation had to partner with the Water and Sewer Division. So the McIntosh Park Wetland Project is this little puzzle to the right. Sometimes you might hear it called the Integrated Water Management project, because the whole thing is we've got reclaimed water, we've got stormwater we have to figure out, we've got recharging the aquifer, but the end result is to provide a natural habitat park that we want to see out in that area. In addition to the wetland project, we also have a project for indirect potable reuse. That is taking our reclaimed water, running it through the cycle on the bottom of the screen, and all the technology that you see on the bottom of the screen, and coming out with potable water, standard water. Now, we've got a plan in next fiscal year to do sampling for that pilot program. So that's the $100,000 that we put into this project for that purpose. Lift Station 2, this has been an ongoing project for a couple of years as we started setting money aside for it. But this basin is huge to the city. Everything flows through here. We're planning to determine whether we can increase the capacity, whether we need to split the basin, or a hybrid of the two. So they're developing alternatives right now. It should be done by the winter of 2020. Hopefully we have a design, 30% design by summer of 2021. This cost is only a portion of the cost that we're setting aside, and we'll get a better cost when we get down to completed design and budgeting process. The reclaimed water recharge, as you know, we have reclaimed water that we need to get rid of, and so we're in the process of determining. The study is recommending that we put the water to City Hall, to the library, Veterans Park, Linear Park, to Snowden Park, Brewer Pond, River Park. So all of that money is included in next year's budget to retrofit that reclaimed water. The design is 60% complete now, so we should begin construction shortly after next fiscal year begins. In the utility maintenance and solid waste, they share a building over there on Spooner Drive, and that building is 30 years old. It's needing to be improved, so we had a space needs assessment and an assessment of the building. There was 3 options that the consultant came up with: make minimal improvements to the current facilities, renovate it to meet the building code, or construct a new facility. So in this current budget, we have included money to begin the process to build a new building. We have design money there already. We've been putting money aside because we've been looking at this project for 3 years, but now we brought it to fruition. And the design will begin in November of 2020. Construction should be complete December of 2022.
Diane's touched on this has been about a 3-year slow walk to get to this point and make this recommendation. You know, we've evaluated the current facilities every way you can. We've done structural assessments. We've done air quality assessments. A number of repairs have been done and some remediation to address things that were immediately in need of attention. But the bottom line is you've got a 30-year-old metal building out there that has just really met the end of its useful life. And I just wanted to point out that this has been a very diligent process, and we've looked at a number of factors leading up to this point. And in addition to the building that we're proposing, you will all know from the one-on-ones last week that we're also looking at trying to make a portion of this into a public amenity so that there actually becomes a benefit to the neighborhood and that side of town as a result of this project. But again, a lot of diligence has gone into getting us to this point.
So then I also wanted to bring forward the master planning. This was a huge investment that the city had made in looking at our aging infrastructure and determining how we can better optimize the operations, improve our water quality, and even assist the fire department with the ISO rating. So on the right, you'll see water distribution, collection system, and lift stations. Those were the 3 areas that we did master planning, and we've only put out the money. We began it in 2019, 2018, but we expect completion in September. Although this information wasn't available for this budget, we will use the information for next year's capital planning. It'll help us with growth in the area, and it'll provide for better cost estimates for infrastructure improvements. The solid waste fund, no residential increase. As a matter of fact, you know we'll be bringing back a new rate structure once the automation service is in place based on the can size that you have. There is a 3% non-residential rate increase in there based on the rate study that we did last April. Then as you can see in the 2020-21 budget, we have a use of fund balance of $1.7 million. The whole reason for that is to purchase 3 residential side loader vehicles to be prepared for the automation service and to purchase 12,000 carts. $684,000 for the residential carts that we need. The last thing that was done in the rate study was the transfer station. So we brought forward to you that the possibility of having a transfer station. And so now we're working on the study, and it should be complete by the spring of 2021. Just wanted to update you on that. In the stormwater fund, the code provides for a 3% rate increase each year. And as you see in last fiscal year, we had used quite a bit of fund balance, and that was towards the Roseland Park project. Next year, we're only using a small amount of fund balance, and we'll demonstrate to you the reason why in a moment. The stormwater drainage pipe repairs, every year we put aside $200,000 towards when things get broke and we need to fix them. So we have certain plans, but we also prepare for the unexpected. That's your $200,000. Roseland Park, we're happy to know that maybe 2 months ago, we adjusted the budget and got it fully funded. So we're prepared to get started on that soon in fiscal year 2020. The stormwater management plan is a $1.3 million project. It's 50% funded by the city, $650,000 by the Swift Mud as well. So we have put this money aside already. It's in the budget. And as Swift Mud does the work, they draw down on the money from us. So we keep the money in our bank until they need it. They're working on the watershed evaluation portion right now. We've paid a little bit out. As the results come in, we expect that to be done at the end of 2021, just to keep you abreast with what's going on with that subject. The street sweeping operation has been done outsourced in previous years. You know, in fiscal year 2008, we used to have it as an in-house project. We've made a little bit of a switch this year and tried to provide you with one position and leasing the vehicle rather than buying the vehicle. The benefit to leasing the vehicle is that if it breaks down, the company has to provide us with another vehicle. We think by doing this, we will be vacuuming as well, more so than just blowing the dust around in the mechanical sweepers that we have right now. We also want to be able to clean the catch basins out better, keep the roadways cleaner. That'll provide for better storm drainage system. And we can do twice as many curb miles as what we're doing currently by outsourcing it. So this is a net annual increase, but we think it's a great benefit to our city. After they get moved into their new facility, we're expecting this to begin in April of 2021. So in our fleet replacement fund, we have 55 new vehicles in these various divisions. And there was a request of 79, so it's not like as everything comes due, we just automatically fund it. We go through a diligent process to look at everything, so this is what we've come up with for next fiscal year. The debt service, I mentioned to you earlier that we pay for City Hall and Police Station out of CIT funds. These are the balances left on the debt that we have, and they both are coming due on September 1st, 2024. Our water and sewer department also has debt service payments that was used to expand the wastewater treatment facility back in 2005, 6, and 7. Total debt service annually is $3.2 million, and this is the amount that's outstanding. Will be paid off in 2028. Every year, the city files through Hillsborough County for a federal grant called CDBG grant. The administration portion of that grant for next fiscal year is $55,000. The street improvements portion is $320,000. We have some old debts that are being paid off, and that's what we call program income. The majority of that's going to be used for the Boys and Girls Club. And then the general fund transfer in and the CRA transfer in will cover the balance of our administration expenses in that fund. Madison Park Elementary and Wilson Elementary School, these are also part of the CDBG. As you can see by the yellow, Tyler Street and Renfro Street are going to be milled and resurfaced. We have 3,500 linear feet of new sidewalks that are coming, and they're in the green. The piece that's not on this map, in case you were wondering, was the Wilson Elementary part. We had done Spencer Street last year on the sidewalks, and there's a little piece of Spencer that had not been done. So it's just not on the map because it's a whole other section, but that part's going to be done as well. The design, the contract award, and the completion of the project will all be done in one fiscal year. So finally, the Community Redevelopment Agency Fund. The valuation increased over the year, but the most important part is the tax increment portion because the base value stays the same every year. So last year we had $152 million tax increment. This year we have $169 million. You take the $169 million times our current millage rate, and the city contributes from our general fund into the CRA fund $921,000. When we put that $921,000 into the CRA fund, the county also puts in $924,000, and Tampa Port Authority puts in $16,000. So that gives us our $1.862 million to spend in the CRA fund. Then we have several CRA expenditures, which these are typical annual expenditures: code enforcement, demolition, along with the code enforcement officer that we added last fiscal year. We have crime patrol in the area that's been ongoing for the last 4 or 5 years, maybe more longer than that. And incentive program. The incentive program is huge. As businesses in the area want to improve their interior or exterior, the city will match that. And then the property maintenance of this portion. As you all know, back in January, February last fiscal year, we did the strike force and we did a bunch of downtown cleanup. We use CRA funds as we can in that area to maintain the appearance of our city. Then there are some major CRA projects that are planned. Public parking lots is a set aside of money. You know, we have the depot property, we have the Mahoney property, that's in the works right now. But then something's going to happen in the future, so we keep putting money aside for the future ones. We talked about street resurfacing. I'm going to skip Midtown right now. I'm going to talk about the Brick Road restoration. A portion of Drain Street is going to be improved on that portion. You know, brick roads are more expensive than just regularly paving roads. So we're going to fix that between Wheeler and others. And then Ballfield and Court lighting. We have a whole CIP project that's more than just $20,000. But with the $20,000 that's in the CRA district, those lights will be fixed with CRA funds. And then the Brewer Park, we had the restroom facilities, and then we put in the fitness trail equipment, and now we're going to spend $75,000 towards determining what we need to do on the parking improvements. That's not to fund the parking improvements, it's just to do a design. And then, as we did over at Brewer Park, we're going to do the same thing over at Cooper Park, the fitness trail equipment over there. It's the same exact equipment that we had. We'll add that to them. And then in the Midtown utility systems, what we've got here is CRA funds set aside to be able to do gravity sewer mains, water mains, lift stations, whatever we need to do to get the redevelopment project moving forward. So in closing, we have set the proposed millage rate. Everyone's got their tax bills already, stating 5.7157. The rollback rate was 5.2846. If you had wanted to adopt something greater than 5.71, these were the rules you had to apply to based on the state. And today we're having our budget workshop with any other additions you would like to have. We'll have our first public hearing on September 14th, our second public hearing, final public hearing on September 28th. And we have a balanced, responsible budget, proactive community engagement, investment in our workforce, and some major capital improvements that we have planned for our city. And with that,
So, you set the record? 3 hours, oh, wow. Well, anyway, obviously, add our hours together. You had a lot of experience delivering this budget. First of all, great job. And, you know, and the way I think that is presented is also great for all our citizens to be able to look at it and see how this budget stretches far and wide throughout our city, make major enhancements and so forth. But I do think at this time we have some questions from the commission that we all have. And then, and I know Commissioner Mathis, you were the first one to speak, said that when are we going to ask questions or make suggestions? Would you like to lead off?
I certainly will. First and foremost, I I want to say thank you to the city manager, our CFO, to the department heads that I see here, because I know department heads have to give their wish list to the city manager, and sometimes he can grant them their wish. And those are tough meetings. He's smiling, but thank you for that. This was a very detailed PowerPoint, thank you, with colors and graphics. And what I noticed, and you've said this before, Mr. Mayor, it looks like almost every part of the city, they're going to get something new or some type of upgrade. So thank you for that. If you all could go with me to page, if you have your handout, one thing I want to bring up on page 10, if you could go to the salary, non-step pay, police and fire step pays. Okay. This is what I'm proposing.
If you don't mind, can we get to that page first? This was
It's a
showing the
lot.
2.5% increase.
Yeah, 2.5% increase.
Okay. I'll get there eventually.
Take your time.
But go ahead, you can.
You've only had, this is number 7, it's your 7th time. Actually 8.
Yes. Depending on how many times I practice at home. It's only 92 slides. There. There. All right.
Right there. This was my thought and my proposal to the commission. We've been in a pandemic, COVID-19, coronavirus, and we've had to close the city hall. Our employees still worked. They still provided services to our citizens, to us. Some even worked from home. My thought is to take, you could say thank you many times, but let's really show thanks. Instead of 2.5%, and I talked to the city manager and the CFO to take this to 3% for our employees this year. To say thank you, we really appreciate them, and it would be a total cost of
$140,000.
$140,000 to take it to 3%, and that $140,000 will come from
All the funds, streets fund, stormwater fund, water and sewer, and general fund.
Okay, and I think on the page you had, it was like 1.4 million, but it'll take it to like 1.6 million. On the page.
Usually about 50% of salaries is for general funds, so
Right.
probably 1.5, 1.6, yes ma'am.
So I want to bring that up for a discussion, to say thank you to our employees. We appreciate them. Police was out there, fire was out there. They did not miss a beat picking up our garbage. Instead of 2.5, take this to 3% for our employees. Now, we're going to do this year. Won't say it'll happen every year. We don't know, because you never know what happened. But I'm proposing we take the salary for our employees, non-step pay, police and fire step plans, instead of 2.5 to 3%.
Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, we're fine with that proposal from a staff and management perspective. We worked with the CFO on how that would actually be spread across all the funds and where the revenue would actually come from. As we discussed with you in the one-on-ones, the 2.5% was based on the CPI plus a little bit, but I think that in looking at it, if that was the will of the commission, we can make this work.
Okay. Council comments? Speaking with Ken Bucknell, obviously he's here, but he's listening from home today, but he is available if we need him. This isn't something we have to vote on, but it's a consensus, because we're going to vote on it, again, when we have the public hearings and so forth. So, any thoughts on taking it from 2.5 to 3%?
If I may,
Please, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Mathis. I love the sentiment and where your heart is on it. Obviously, I think we all love our city employees very, very much, and want to do the best we possibly can for them. I do have some concerns though. I think we also have to be, while I certainly want to see tremendous morale in the city and I want people to feel like they're appreciated and respected and cared for what they do. I also want to make sure that we're sensitive to what's happening across our community. There are a lot of folks that not only aren't getting any raises, they don't have any jobs. And I just want to make sure that we're not, that we're sensitive to that at this dais and not doing more for our own folks than what some folks can have done for them out in the community as well. I think it should be based, on what's competitive in the marketplace and and we've looked at those adjustments in the past several years. So I think, given where the consumer price index is and a modest bump on that to 2.5%, and then also recognizing that the city is absorbing all of the healthcare costs and not asking employees to pay anything additional to that. That's, in some respects, an additional component to a raise in and of itself. So I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but those would be my concerns about making that adjustment.
Any other comments? This is my, I think, 17th or 18th budget I will be voting on. And I concur with both sides of this. I've never had a good year, okay, in those 17 years where there wasn't something that makes it hard to, to give the raise, to give an increase, to step up, make changes. We did do something that I thought that was absolutely monumental the previous 2 years where we did the study and we brought everyone back up to that study, which was a 7% increase and a 7.5% increase
for 3 years.
which in my 17 or 18 years we've never done before, especially back to back. So that definitely brought everyone's jobs in line with that particular study. I think one of the concerns I always have, or not concerned, but one of the goals you always have is trying to make sure we don't get far behind, because we don't want to pay our individuals any less than what they can make somewhere else for doing the same job, okay? And B, I want to make sure that we're not in that situation again where we're sitting here and we're 15% behind the market, and then we have to take 2 years and make these massive increases. It's not good for our budget, and it's not good for our employees. So always, I think it's the comment you made there is that what are other, municipalities doing right now?
Are we competitive?
Are we competitive? Well, I know we were competitive at the end of last year, okay? And I guess the question really is that what keeps us competitive going forward? So we're not 15% behind the marketplace. Is it 2.5 this year? Is it 3% this year? What is that number that keeps us competitive? Diane, would you have any information on that, or city manager?
From what looking I've done, we are competitive to the east and probably in very good footing going east. We are always pretty much in a scrap when you go west. And of course, our greatest market influences come from the west. We don't necessarily lose employees to job opportunities east of us. We lose them to the west. So maintaining that competitive stance, we've always had the position of we're not necessarily trying to equal, but we are trying to be competitive. We have some very big players on our particular block that make that difficult. And I think that the discussion along the lines of not losing the advantage that we have created through some pretty significant investments over the last several years is an important one, along with everything else that we're hearing. So,
And another thought or consideration, an issue with a raise is that compounds every year. So it's not just this year, but then you've got then next year it's on top of that, and on top of that, on top of that. So maybe another thing to think about, and of course we don't have to decide this evening, is instead of making an additional 0.5% raise, maybe it's 10% bonus as an alternative.
Since I brought this up and I hear both comments, I would not have brought this up if our country, our city had not been going through what we've been through. And I'm right now speaking from the heart. Our employees, you see them day to day. We get letters and you see that from our citizens, how they want to say thank you to what they've done. I would not be objective to the 0.5% bonus if that is the way we should go. But if we went to the 3% increase and work with this, what would be the projection for next year? Could you answer that now? Or is that something you would have to come back with us? If we did the bonus
instead of it, well, we would start out with $140,000 less, and then if we came back with a 2 or 2.5%, it would be on $140,000 less, is all that it would make a
but
difference.
did you have any idea in your mind, what would be the projection for raise for next year if we went to a 3% this year? If you had it somewhere,
Yeah.
or you would have to bring that back to?
Yeah.
Well, I think everything being constant, it's another 140,000
Okay.
each year that you're raising it, adjusting for an increase in employees or some other outside factor that would change that. If the workforce is the same and the salaries are relatively the same, it's the same increase.
Right.
But you're, to the vice mayor's point, you're just adding that every year going forward. And then, of course, in the future, when you do an additional increase, it's now on that higher salary, and that's where the compounding begins to come in. But I think the answer to the question you're actually asking is theoretically, you could be looking at another $140,000 the following year and every year thereafter by making it an actual pay raise.
Or the comment that he made, we can do this one time, like 5% bonus, and then we would not have that compounded every year.
I'm going to weigh in and, you know, whatever the commission decides to do or not do, of course, we'll go with that and we'll bring you back what you need. I would seriously ask you, if you're going to consider this, leave it in the realm of a pay raise rather than a one-time bonus, because it doesn't have the desired impact. And I think it actually creates problems and it sets us up for some of that market trail that has already been mentioned. And I think that if you're willing to make the investment, do it as the additional 0.5% on the pay, because we're just going to have to make it up later at some future date if we don't. And I just feel strongly that to go the other way is more akin to kicking the can down the road. I mean, it's good. It would be better than nothing. But if we could do it as a salary increase, I think that's really the optimal and ideal way to do it.
Your Honor. Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not ready at this time. I'll take this all under advisement, but I'm not ready to make that decision in this meeting because I feel like that I have some more questions I'd like to ask in reference to this. But also, I would love to go through the first public hearing, because we've got to hear what the public has to say. And we got to understand, like the Vice Mayor said, how the community's feeling. So I'm not prepared to make this decision this time. And I agree with what you said earlier, that it needs to be deferred till after the first public hearing. We can make a determination at that time.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a comment, then we may be able to move on after that. As the city manager pointed out so clearly in the preparation of this budget, the questions of what is appropriate amount of funding to offer for general employees was based on a fact. The fact is that the CPI was under 2.5%, and staff proposed, city manager, CFO proposed 2.5%. That's a fact. And I think for my purposes, that's a valid way of looking at a proposal for increasing costs on general employees. The market conditions, the city manager pointed out, have to do more so with police and fire, as we know, and that's been an issue for as long as we've all been on this board. The circumstances to the west in Hillsborough County City Council with police and fire demand our attention and demand our actions, and we spent a great deal of time and effort considering that several years ago, and we took initiatives and we remedied the problem. The problem was that we were losing people to those departments right after we spent the money to train police and fire. And then away they'd go because they could have a better salary by working for another employer. But we remedied that by taking a policy position and have not had those kind of problems since. And I'm thankful for that. So I feel quite comfortable actually, and especially the fact, in view of the fact that we are picking up over roughly $350,000 worth of increased costs on health insurance coverage for employees. Not sure what that means by percentage, but my guess is it's certainly more than 1% on top of the 2.5%, maybe 2%. And we've done that several years also, not just the proposed increase this year, but we did it last year. And that makes a significant difference. Those are funds that would be out of pocket otherwise and would make it less than 2.5% by fact that we're picking it up and paying on their behalf. This money in the pocket. They just don't see it the way a salary increase would, but it's the same result, same identical result.
So I think the effective rate is where you're going with that, I think, is if you take the 2.5%, and if you take the non-increase in the health insurance, that's like 1.1%, 1.2%. It's actually about a 3.6, 3.7% increase. If my math is right there. Yes, okay. So it's effectively, without the health insurance, they're getting at least a 3.6% increase, okay?
Would that really be true though, Mr. City Manager, in that the health insurance also includes the police and fire?
Yeah, every employee realizes the benefit of the health insurance being covered to that percentage, yeah.
So just the general employees, 2.5.
I'm not sure the question there, but I want to make it clear that the 2.5 applies to all employees, and it does include a 2.5% adjustment to the step plans as well. So it's all employees.
That's right.
Yeah, it's all employees.
So they're effectively 7.5%.
Okay, yeah.
With the health, and they would, with the step they have, that whole 1% increase would not apply to them because they have a larger increase, but actually it would. We've been 1% across the board. Yeah. And tonight, Mr. City Manager, are you looking for us to try to give you a clear-cut decision on all these areas, or are you looking for us to be able to have ask questions and have you come back to the first public hearing to answer some of those stuff so that we can, because I know we can make adjustments up till the final budget.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the way I was tracking this was we would bring back exact numbers and have them available at the public hearing. As was already said, that's our first opportunity to get some comments based on what's been presented in the discussion. And we will have solid answers to all of these. We already know the estimated total cost. For the difference, we'll nail down the actual effective rate. And we will try to give you some better sense of where it positions us overall. Those are the things that I'm hearing.
Okay. So then, instead of taking action on this tonight, the action is actually first for you to bring us back and answer the questions we all have so that we can discuss it and vote on it in our first public hearing. Okay. Okay. Commissioner Matthews, is that good with you?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions for our CFO?
Yeah, if we take a minute just to go back and look at the general fund balance, I believe it's around 14 million and change. And where, remind me on where we're projecting that to be with the current budget at the end of the. Okay. So just a couple of points that I wanted to make. The first thing when I see the budget and I see 9.9% increase, I get the sticker shock right out of the gate. So that's just the way my conservative brain works. 10% is a big increase and certainly not sustainable over time. So then I ask myself, how can we make sure that we have a responsible budget? And there's a couple of things that are important to me in looking at it. And one is to understand, what's happening with our fund balance. And being at 44% of general fund revenues is astronomical for any municipality. And to see that we're actually projecting that to increase year over year, we're looking at a small decrease from the end of this year to next year. So about 800,000 decrease from the end of this budget year to the end of next budget year. Is that correct? Going from 16.2 to 15.3. Yes. So still very, very healthy. And seeing that the 9.9% increase, a lot of that is capital improvements, going back to the previous point, that it's not annual recurring costs, right? So we're adding these raises and some other things that are in there that are going to keep going every year. But a big chunk of that is coming out of resources that we have for improvements that are one-time costs that aren't going to be compounding on each other. So I just wanted to make some comments about all of that. And then also wanted to entertain the idea of, I get a little concerned too about, just where we are with the COVID economy and the uncertainty of that. I saw a very interesting report from Blackstone that talked about the impact to municipalities after during recessions is usually felt in the year and the 2 years after it happens. So the decline in revenues don't typically happen in that recession year. They tend to hit after the fact. So not knowing what that magnitude is, I'm glad to see that we're still going to have a very strong fund balance, but also want to be thoughtful about paying down the rest of our debts. And so back to the safety pension fund. Making a significant commitment to that this year, over and above what's required, to the tune of $785,000. I'd like to see us do even a little bit more than that. I'd really like to see a big chunk, but if we could at least round that up to an even million, that would make me very happy. I'd love to see us get up to, mid 70% range, but I think that would require quite a bit more, going toward that. But I think if we've got some general fund money there, we feel strong about it, then it's better used to pay down that obligation than to sit there and earn money market rates.
I love where you're taking that. If I can take one question here, because I'm going to tell you something I would support, and it might be a larger number than what you're suggesting here, and you can take it at the value. But even though we're showing an $800,000 decrease, once we get at the end of the year, we always have excess, which is unused.
We didn't spend $1.5 million this year.
Right. So even though that's showing that we're going to be, we're actually not. We're actually going to probably have almost $1 million increase. When you look at the reallocation of funds at the end of the year, because this happens every single year with our budgeting process. So we're showing a decrease when in all reality every year we see an increase, just like we did this last year, $1.5 million. So if I look at an area that has had great improvement, okay, and I really compliment the board on all the decisions and that y'all made on that. If there's an area when we were looking at getting the best return on the dollars in here, like what you said, having a fund balance when every city's goals to be at a 15%, we're at a 44%. It's always like, how much is enough to, is the money better there, or the money better being, utilized in the community? And that pension fund, we've made great strides the last couple of years. I like the investment we're making, okay, but I would support a much higher number if y'all have a suggestion there. And I would even go for an additional million.
I would love to see that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to comment on that. Last year, we talked about this in depth, and it was clear that our interests were trying to do everything we could to support funding for the deficit on the pension plan for state employees. And where it was not where we wanted it to be. Our goal was to arrive at 80% because we felt like 80% was really a very healthy funding level, considering the fact that not all public safety employees will retire all at the same time. It happens over a typically scheduled period of time. So at 80%, you're likely to be able to take care of everyone's needs and our obligations to provide those needs. And we talked about committing more money last year, which we did because we made more money coming in. This year is a good example of making more than we made last year because it's been an outstanding year again. And we will have a more than sufficient general fund balance to accommodate that. So I would also concur that we should look at that number and let the city manager come back to us with an amendment, CFO as well, and make an amendment to that offer and utilize that money in better capacity than what it would be if it were just sitting around and gaining some interest. That's good for our community, but it's also good for our community to make certain that the public safety, public employee pension plan is properly funded to avoid any.
Mr. City Manager, if we did the $1 million, where would that take us to?
Well, if you do what's proposed, as has been mentioned, it would get you to a funded level of 72%. If you put another $1 million on top of the proposed budget, that's going to get you to 74%. We also have a new policy that was enacted last year where we forced Diane to turn over all the money at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then that money goes to work and earns all year. So I think net effect, where you see a good year, that net result would be higher than the 74% as far as its impact to the fund. And those are very significant strides toward the goal of 80.
And it's likely that if we continue to have the success we've had with growth of the community and property tax increases from the business adaptations we've been making, it's foreseeable that we could arrive at that goal within a couple of years. And I think that would be a worthy goal of this commission to do that and to do everything we can to make it happen. I don't think we can say in advance that we can obligate the budget to that, but we can do everything we can within reason, provided the income is sufficient coming in from a good year to do that and make it happen.
I just can't help but point out, we're talking about only 2/3 of the expected excess in the current. And I think, quite frankly, that's a lot of bang for the buck.
And it takes a fund that, if there's one funding that the most help is that fund, and we have the opportunity right now, and we haven't had that opportunity, because what you said is exactly right. If you go back to when the Great Recession started, it was 2010 that really hit, and but we had the reserves there, and we went right through it, and and we still have those funds very healthy there today. So I think you see consensus here that when you bring the budget back for the first public hearing to add $1 million on top of what we already said that we were going to add to it. Is that consensus from everybody?
I'm good with that.
Yes.
Commissioner Bartman?
Well, yes. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm just really kind of being a little quiet because I'm prejudiced because I've been on that the Board of Trustees for over 25 years and currently chairman for the last several. So I welcome and I appreciate the efforts of the commission for us to get this right. And we on the Board of Trustees have worked diligently, very hard for years and years to get it to that point. And it would be greatly appreciated, I'm sure, by all the membership.
Well, I think it all makes it our employees feel more confident in that fund as well if they know that it's being funded appropriately like that. So, Okay, so let's go ahead and add that. Okay. Any other adjustments?
If I might, as I discussed during all the one-on-ones, I think that in the situation we find ourselves in with the reserves, I think that this would be an appropriate time to designate or earmark an emergency fund within the reserves. We live in Florida. We have hurricanes that we have to deal with. We've been through a pandemic, and this is a sound fiscal practice and policy to establish an emergency fund, so you know that you have monies earmarked and designated for that purpose. And in looking at this, my recommendation would be that we designate $3 million of the reserves as an emergency fund. The money is in the reserves, but we know that that is basically our bank to go to in the event of some type of catastrophic emergency that befalls our city.
So then we can change the budget anyhow. We're doing it just, we're setting a good policy so that future commissions, future leaders know that those dollars are always sitting aside there for emergency disasters like that. Right. So it's just good policy, right? Okay. So we have consensus with the commission on that? Okay. Any other recommendations?
No, sir. Not on that.
Okay. Commissioners, any other recommendations?
I don't have any further recommendations, but I do have a couple of things I'd like to say. For me, this year, this budget probably brings more pleasure to see it forecasted and potentially implemented by us in September after the public hearings. And the reasons for it, as we were going along, I had listed 15 likes and 2 dislikes within the budget. I just added the 16th one with the emergency fund. We talked about that in the one-on-one meetings, and couldn't agree more with the city manager. That's a very wise fiscal policy to sustain. And we've got the funds, again, available to do that. And it goes hand in hand with many other set-aside funds that we already do, all of which have proved to be highly useful and successful. Only 2 dislikes I'll mention is the property general liability insurance increased cost and the city health insurance increased cost. Both of them continue to rise. I'm not certain what other things can be done. I know staff has done about everything they can with health insurance, even with self-funding, to try to get that under control, yet it still continues to rise dramatically. The general liability insurance, maybe more we can do with that to get that cost back down, because it jumped up, and there's good reasons for it. I know, I understand them. Yet we have to keep them going the other direction so they don't continue to go that way. But I'll concentrate on the likes because there's 16 of them instead of the 2 that I didn't like. They were the capital improvement program. I'm really excited about. We're actually taking a great deal of money and using it for very good improvements within the community that the community will benefit from. And I like that. That's what we're supposed to be doing with our funding. I like all the set-aside funds. I like the information technology upgrades, the outreach programs from social media. I like the body camera proposal that city manager is looking further into as we move forward. I think that's something that we've talked, again, further about in other years. Couldn't come quite to an agreement at that time, but I think the time has arrived for them. I like the fact that we didn't have to do this with a tax increase. The 5.7 remains. And all the extra fund balance, I like that. The automated collection of solid waste, got that going. And improving the solid waste facility, which desperately needs to be done after 30 years of time spent in that building. And I'm really excited about what the future holds with working over the next 3 years to get the McIntosh product from infancy, where we're at, to completion over the next 3 years. And that'll become a product of regional significance to the city. And it creates a self-supporting supply of water for ourselves, so that that will go well beyond our time. And I'm thankful that we're able to work on having that project completed. Our financial trends and our enterprise funds were all in great condition, and they're all trending in the right way, which is good. And we're going to use one of those enterprise funds to change the method in which we're going to be cleaning the streets of the community. Instead of sweeping them and moving sand around a lot by an outside source, we'll do it within our own, and leasing a piece of equipment that will be effectively paid for by the stormwater fund that we collect, which is just a few dollars each month from each resident. And it will pay for it. That will, I think, be another incremental increase in fundamental core services that a city performs for its residences. And we can't overlook those fundamental core services. That's what a municipality is all about, doing things that don't get a whole lot of notoriety, but are things that we're responsible for doing. All of those are covered in this budget, and I'm very excited about that.
Thank you very much.
I might comment too, based on his two dislikes. I can tell you that the business community, as you well know, are suffering from the same situation. Some people can't even get insurance, and the rates keep going up, and hospitalization insurance just keeps going up. But I have confidence in our staff that they monitor that, and they're very aggressive to take whatever avenue that they can that's cost effective for the plant city, as most businessmen are trying to do too. So the business community is feeling our pain because they have it too. And
I realize if it's not double-digit increase.
right. So
It's a celebration.
so that's only two things we got to complain about. We're in good shape.
We don't like it. That's why we're all smiling here tonight, so. The last several years, when I look at our budget, I'm going, gosh, how can we ever have a budget as nice as this one? And then the next year we come around and we're like, okay, we can have a better budget that makes, pushes us more forward. And all our budgets, always, the goal is to try to impact the entire city. We all represent the entire city, and we have budgets that make improvements throughout the entire city. And then you look at this year, and it's leaps and bounds better than last year's budget, which was a monumental, budget for us with major improvements. Well, we just had the Sadie Gibbs Martin, grand opening. We're about to have the fire station next month, and then all of a sudden we have this one here. And a lot of these projects, we talk about for years and years, but it's hard to ever get them to reality. And here we are every year, reality. We're bringing these from being a dream to being, hey, it's a grand opening, and it's just nice, and all of a sudden we're starting to take for granted that our roads are new, and our water and sewer systems are being improved, and our parks are being improved, and all of a sudden we're putting in weights and recreational facilities in Brewer Park and now Cooper Park, and everywhere you look at, there's just great improvements, and I think our citizens recognize it.
And Mr. Mayor, I might add, pardon me for interrupting you, but I might add, an important aspect of all of what you just said was all of those things were provided for by cash within the budget. Well, there was no indebtedness that was incurred.
We didn't borrow a dime, no. But if I look at it, we made great decisions as a team to really go out there and compete and bring in great companies, okay, that can add the revenues. It creates the revenues for us to do what we're doing. But at the same time, it would be very easy to have a budget today to where we add a lot of reoccurring cost, okay? And once you add that reoccurring cost, you don't get the chance to relieve yourself from that reoccurring cost. And all of a sudden, if we just raise the budget up where our annual operating costs without capital expenditures eats up all that. And that's where so many cities are at across America, is their operating cost and their revenue is one and the same. And then go out and borrow money to balance it. And we're not in that situation. We're able to take that extra revenue and make capital improvements in our city. And I hope it's a standard that we continue. Mr. City Manager, I admire I see how many requests you have for additional personnel. And as you know, when you're looking at 80% of your budget cost is personnel cost, that, you know, trying to keep that number at that lowest denominator. So one of my favorite slides in here is when we look at, you know, the number of employees per thousand. You know, our revenue per capital, resident in our city. All those key indicators. If we stay there and continue to, you know, make the aggressive and be that city where businesses want to do business in, by us making these investments that we're making to our city, I think we have a long, prosperous life. Now, I do know that we don't have another capital County Line Road. You know, we're getting close to, you know, to maximizing County Line Road, but that's going to be something that's going to continue to pay year after year after year now. You know, I know we're making additional improvements on South 39. We also are now starting to fill in Lakeside Station and some of the other business communities like we have on I-4 over here. So I know that it's not coming, you know, it's not slid. It's just that now we're going to even have to fight a little harder because the sale's not quite as easy as County Line Road for some of these potential opportunities that we have. So Mr. City Manager, I really want to applaud you on not only us doing what it takes to bring in the revenues it takes to be able to make the investments we are in our city, but really are towing the hard line, keeping our reoccurring costs down. Okay, and because it'd be so easy to fill 25 open slots for employees because you have the request there. So I know that's a battle you have every year, and every business, and in our own businesses we fight that same battle. So you know, if I could pat you on the back on anything more than ever, it's just the ability to say no to those increases in personnel because they're always there. You know, so I'm really thrilled that we have a budget here that I think that our public, when we have our public hearings, will be thrilled about. Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, a follow up to you. Although the land that is on County Line Road has mostly now been spoken for, and it's forecasted for development. That development hasn't all occurred yet. So
right.
The likelihood of us continuing this trend towards financial sufficiency will most likely continue at least over the next few years. And as you suggest, there will come a time when those buildings are all built and County Line Road will be full, and we don't have another one of those, but we do have other projects forthcoming that look very promising for certain. So our future, I think, looks very bright as it has always. This time it really is shining like Christmas time in the summer. I believe it's going to be very good for us.
Well, I'm really glad that we went ahead and made the investment last year to get 39 South done, because by the time it's finished, you're right, we still have 3 to 4 more years to build out before those projects are built out, and by then we should have County Line Road online and with the commercial development we're looking for there, as well as land that we've have put improvements on over the last 10 years that are now like with the Sadler Group and so forth. You know, so I feel very good that it doesn't come to an end. It's just that, you know, I just don't think we need to think that it's always going to be as lucrative as it is right now, because we're definitely winning more than we're losing right now when we're competing with our neighboring county and cities and so forth. So I think it's a wonderful, wonderful budget. If there's no other comments, we need to open up for public comment. Vice Mayor.
Just final comments. Thank you, Your Honor. Again, thank you, Mr. City Manager, our Chief Financial Officer, and your entire team, and all the department heads. I know it's a daunting task to put together, and months and months and months of hard work, but this is the culmination of it. It's very exciting. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your comments. There's a concept in personal financial planning called lifestyle creep. When you start earning more, you keep increasing that lifestyle, and you're always chasing it to the point where if you don't have any margin, you get used to it. And if those revenues don't come in, then all of a sudden you got to change things pretty quickly. And we've done a great job in Plant City of providing a great quality of life, and we're continuing to do that and make great improvements with the additions we're making. But we never want to be in a situation where we have great amenities, we have great services, we have all these things, and then all of a sudden, at one point in time, we've got to ratchet that way back because of when we haven't planned well. And to your point, when you add too many of those recurring costs, that's when you get into that trap. So very happy with where we are in the financial and fiscal responsibility we've had. Not something that we need to consider tonight, but again, to be forward thinking and looking, we're not too far, 5 years away, 6 years away from the CIT funds going away. So that's something that does have to be on our long-term radar as we're planning and thinking ahead, because that is a significant source of resources for us. And last comment, Commissioner Dodson mentioned the body cameras, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the wisdom of the city manager and everybody thinking through how to approach that. I like the concept of a pilot program for that. I still need a significant education on it. I'd like to know a lot more about policies and procedures, state statutes, the overall final cost. Certainly a trend that things are, going across the country and here, in our own region. But there's a lot for me to learn there that I would like to know before we commit to a final strategy there. Thank you.
So the pilot program works out well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Just a real smart remark to say, but we've got to give our hats off to you too for the amount of time and effort that you put in your job as mayor. I don't know that anybody's ever devoted themselves that much. We got $1 million businessman and $1 million salesman, and it shows. So thank you and congratulations on what you've been able to accomplish for our community.
Well, thank you very much. I tell you that I think we're a great team, and and it's paying off well. So thank you.
I want to make a final comment too. First of all, thank you to this commission. Even though we're going through this pandemic, we've still been working. Like you said, we had the ribbon cutting of the community center, got the fire station, the renovation. We're still working, and things are still happening in the city. Thank you to all of our citizens that are here today. I said to Mr. City Manager, that 2-hour meeting was so inspiring to me, and thank you as well, and all the department heads. I can kind of feel what you've gone through with the city manager and your wish list. But thank you to everybody, and especially to this commission for working together for our citizens.
Well, thank you very much. We do have one more budget item we need to discuss. Okay.
He's about to raise that. Okay.
Every year we have a decision to make, and we have before you our city manager, our city clerk, and our city attorney, and they're up for their raises, and so the one individual I want to first start off talking about is our city manager. This is his third budget. And when our city manager started off, we brought him in at $150,000, which was $15,000 less than the previous city manager. Okay, if we'd have brought him in at where our previous city manager was at, with the increases that occurred over the last 2 years, as well as the 2.5%. Or usually 3%, whichever one we agreed upon in our budget, he would be this year at 193. Okay. If you take where he's at right now, he's at 166, which is literally about $1,000 more than what the city manager was making 4 years ago. Okay. And so with the 2.5% increase, he would go to 170. I said it earlier, there's never a good time. You can always find a reason not to do something a little bit extra for someone that's given a lot extra. And, I think one of the reasons why we started our city manager at below where our previous city manager was at, that night is where we advertised that, but also he was new to being a city manager, and we had a very seasoned city manager before. Okay, but I can tell you, I didn't see an adjustment at all. Our city manager hit the ground running as if he was the city manager for many years, and I can tell you, he took projects that were on hold and made them reality. And his staff, he made adjustments, and he took things that we had discussed in our budgets for many years, and sometimes with a little bit of frustration, whereas why isn't this completed yet? And he completed projects. And so I really feel like that if we'd have known that we'd have the result that we've had, and hopefully I'm wording this right, we would have started them not at 150, but where the previous city manager, because I don't think we missed a step or missed a beat. And that's with a lot of respect to Mr. Herr, but it's also showing respect for our city manager. Saying that we need to take him to 193, like Mr. Herr would be if he was still here? No. Okay. But I do believe that his worth is a lot more than where he's at. Do the 2.5, which would take him to 170. My suggestion to the commission would be to give him a 5.35% raise, okay, instead of a 2.5% raise, which would take him to a flat 175, okay, and that's still. If we had started him at the 165 where our previous city manager was at, he'd be at 193. That's still what, 18,000 more he would be if we had started him where our previous predecessor was at. So I'd like to throw that for conversation. Again, that's something that we can agree upon tonight, or it's something to be brought back if you need to have more time to think about it at our first public hearing that we have. Okay. A 5.35, which would take him from 166 to 175, or on top of the 2.5 right now, he would be getting 166 to 170. This would just round it to 175. Okay.
Your Honor, I would make a motion to accept your recommendation.
Okay. Is there a second?
I would second that motion with discussion.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion to do a 5.35 increase for the city manager, and it's also been seconded. Open for discussion.
I think as we're doing with the other matter of considering a 2.5 to 3% increase, we ought to get that information back, and we should also at the same time get this information back. It does appear that there's interest in doing that, and I would welcome it. But I think we ought to wait until we get through that first public hearing, as Commissioner Sparkman spoke of, and then hear all of it together before we make we move to the second public hearing with the final budget.
So is the motion to bring it back to the public hearing, Mr. Sparkman?
No, Your Honor, and the reason I think it's different is because staff cannot propose these three officials, the city attorney, city manager, and city clerk, all work for the commission. So staff could not bring a recommendation to the city commission because it's our responsibility to establish this. So I think if we establish it now, going forward, we can always change it by the end of it, or we at least everybody knows, the citizens know what the mayor's recommendation was, and I'll be willing to vote for that tonight.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. These are the charter officials, and these are the only three members of the 480 employees of the city that we employ, that we make for employment.
I'd like to, yes, Mr. Mayor, first of all, I think last time, we talked about our city clerk, we had that discussion, remember? And we brought our city clerk up to where she should be as to what the market is. And I think that our city attorney is where he should be. In an organization, you have to have a head, someone to lead. And I think I always tell our city manager, thank you. He's always thinking, he has ideas, he He's there for us. You call him anytime, he's there to answer. But more importantly, when you talk and you hear from the employees, they enjoy working with him. They love his leadership. I second the motion with discussion so that we can have discussion. And to our city manager, I want to say thank you for what you have brought to the city, what you do. I will vote for this motion because like Commissioner Sparkman said, these are our charter. They work for us, and we need to bring you to where you need to be at this time. So I would definitely vote yes for this motion. Don't forget about the one that I made about the 3%. I had to put that in there. Thank you, sir.
Any other comments?
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, I appreciate the discussion. I think, again, as it related to kind of on point with the discussion about the increase to 3%, the question I have to ask myself, is it fair to do, more for our city manager than it is for everybody else? And that was a challenge that I had when we voted for our clerk previously. I think at this point, though, we've gone through the heavy lifting of the overall analysis for all of our employees and gotten that right over the past several years. So we've looked at our entire employment base to make sure that everybody was on par and had gotten them there with the significant increases. So I think it's a little bit different discussion now that we've done that work. And so I do think it is reasonable to consider, what the market is and what the compensation is. And because we have the responsibility 3 select specific employees, it is a little bit different in my mind. So I can support it.
Fair enough. Any other questions?
One comment, Your Honor. Does the motion need to be amended to the other recommendations that you have here outlined?
I thought we would discuss those after this motion.
Oh, you want to do all 3 separately? Okay, no further comment.
I'll make a final comment. I think it's reasonable. The proposal you've made, I think is reasonable. So I would support it also.
Fair enough. Okay. This is a voice vote? Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
since there's going to be a vote on this, I'd recommend you go ahead and open up the public comments before the vote and then bring it back.
Okay, fair enough. We'll do that. Okay. I'm so glad you're on the line there, Mr. City Attorney, keeping us straight here. Okay. Okay, for those that are online, we asked for our electronic submittals, and electronic submittals were submitted for public comments were disseminated to the City Commission prior to the next start of the meeting for review and inclusion into the meeting's official records. We appreciate those public comments that were submitted electronically, but at this point in time, we're open for public comment. And the public comment isn't generally just about what we're about to vote on, so that any public comment for anyone that's live here tonight that would like to discuss anything in the budget. Okay, so we're now open for public comment based on the whole public.
Sorry to interrupt. But just as a point of procedure, I guess, are we going to have a public comment on the clerk and the attorney as well? If so, should we?
No, we're doing public comment on the whole budget.
Okay, so we don't need to make any motions first for that before public comment?
Mr. City Attorney?
No, the public comments is on the entire budget. Obviously, that's part of the budget, city attorney, city clerk, but that's completely up to the commission. Does not have to open it up separately after they've opened it one time.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, I'm kind of confused as why he would say this now. He's not saying that we can't go ahead and vote what we have as approved in these pay raises. That's within our authority to do it. We can listen to any comments at the next public hearing, right, and change our vote. But I disagree that we have to submit this without taking a vote to accept the city managers. I don't agree with city manager. City attorney.
Mr. City.
Commissioner, everybody has to have a reasonable opportunity to be heard before there's a vote of the city commission. Since there's a vote on one item, I was going to suggest, obviously, there was going to be a public comment at the end of this, and nothing is final until the actual tentative budget is adopted on the 14th and the final budget is adopted later. But my recommendation is, since there is going to be a vote, just be open for public comment overall for the budget, and then you can go back and vote on any items related to the budget you want.
Anyone in the audience like to address the commission this time regarding the overall budget? Seeing none, public comment is closed. This time we have a motion and a second to have a 5.35 increase to the city manager's salary. Is this a voice vote? Okay, all for signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It's approved with a vote of 5-0. As far as the other two items, okay, we have our city attorney and our city clerk, okay? The recommendation there was to do the exact same increase that we would have for the rest of our employees, since we've already made those adjustments. Like Commissioner Mathis mentioned on the clerk, we did a large increase last year, and then we held with the city attorney. So at that case, I don't think there's really any action other than if we have consensus there, they would be included with the increase, whatever we decide at our first public hearing, whether it's a 2.5% increase or a 3% increase. Is that fine with everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Dawson, you fine with that as well? Yes. Okay. Any other discussion amongst this workshop? Diane, anything you want to close with? No? Mr. City Attorney, City Manager?
I want to make a general comment about the budget presentation tonight for everyone in the audience and those that are streaming. One of the things that I find very impressive about this portion or this part of the budget presentation is that when you look at this is a great indicator of the complexity of our city operation. And all too often, it's the things that are most visible: police, fire, our parks, and so forth. Maybe our buildings like City Hall or the new community center. And this is a great opportunity for everyone in our community to realize what a complex, diverse, and complex operation this really is. And going through this presentation is a real window into that. And I would encourage anyone with an interest to really go through and study this because, again, it gives you great insight to our organization.
It's our roadmap for the future.
Yes. I'd like to make one additional comment. And when you mentioned the recreation projects, those that are listening, the playground and the spring park, the splash park, will be at Sadie Gilman Community Center that we just opened. When I spoke, we talked about things will be coming, and these two projects I just love. So thank you. Thank you.
I understand both of them will be there. One of them will pay SALSA to make a recommendation.
To make a recommendation to where they go.
One said already, to the second water.
The playground is slated to go at the community center now. The splash park, we have design and research money in there. There are a number of variables and factors that go into building a splash park. And before we commit to any locations, we need to make sure we've addressed all the variables and that we're selecting the right location. So the proposal in the budget is only for the research and design phase to determine what we will build and where is the most sustainable place to put it.
Thank you for that correction, but it's coming.
Yeah, thank you.
It's coming. Thank you.
Okay. I almost don't end the meeting. But we have another meeting starting in 40 minutes. That's our regular commission meeting for to close out the month of August. So I want to thank you, all of you, for your participation, your attendance, and I encourage you to come back for our 7:30 meeting. This meeting's adjourned.